Thank you for tuning in to LeadDeveloper.com, where we simplify complex property development feasibilities, investment analysis, and everything real estate. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, our Google Sheets-based feasibility suite streamlines the toughest aspects of real estate. Lead Developer Feasibility Suite is trusted by thousands in over 17 countries. Our tools cover everything from quick assessments to detailed cash flow projections and more. Sign up today at LeadDeveloper.com for unlimited free access to our expanding library of real estate tools. No credit card needed. Plus, get full support through Edge with step-by-step guidance, exclusive courses, and resources designed for your success. Turn numbers into narratives that win over investors and lenders. Join Lead Developer now.
All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're going to take a deep dive into the world of real estate ROI. We've got this awesome guide, How to Calculate ROI on Real Estate. And it's seriously packed with insights that go way beyond just, the simple buy low, sell high kind of stuff. You're ready to really unlock the secrets to making your real estate investments really work for you.
Absolutely. And, it's really interesting how many people kind of jump into real estate without a solid understanding of ROI. It really is the foundation of smart decision-making, whether you're looking at, rental property or thinking about a fix and flip.
So true. And this guide, it doesn't mess around. It lays out multiple ROI calculation methods right away. That piqued my interest right off the bat. Why isn't there just one standard formula everyone uses?
Oh, you got to think about it. Real estate is incredibly diverse. Are you paying cash or are you using financing? What are your holding costs looking like? Even the timing of your investment plays a huge role. That's where the concept of time value of money comes in.
Okay, yeah, that's ringing a bell. But just remind me, how does that apply to real estate specifically?
So imagine you have $100,000 today. You could invest it in a property, sure, but it might take years to see a significant return. On the other hand, you could take that same $100,000 and invest it in something else, like a diversified stock portfolio, for example, and potentially see faster growth. So the opportunity cost of tying up your money in real estate, that's a key consideration.
Ah, okay. So it's not just about the eventual sale price of the property. It's about maximizing the potential of your money over time. That makes a lot of sense. Now, the guide dives into some pretty intriguing ROI metrics, I gotta say. Things like payback ratio, cash-on-cash return, even the gross rent multiplier. It feels like we're about to crack a secret code or something.
They are essential tools, for sure. But just like with any tool, you need to know how to use them correctly. So let's start with the payback ratio. It's basically telling you how long it takes to recoup your initial investment through the property's cash flow. Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah, on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward. But I'm getting the feeling there's more to it.
Oh, there definitely is. Let's say a property has a payback period of 10 years. That might seem reasonable, but remember that time value of money we talked about. Could that same investment generate a higher return somewhere else in those 10 years? That's the real question you need to ask.
So even if a property looks promising based on just its payback ratio, I should be comparing it to other investment options and thinking about how long my money will be tied up. That's a really important nuance.
Exactly. Now, let's move on to cash-on-cash return. This metric focuses specifically on the return you're getting on your cash investment in a given year. So it's helpful for evaluating the performance of, say, a rental property.
Okay, so it's like assessing the efficiency of my initial investment. But how does it differ from just the overall ROI?
Well, overall ROI takes into account the entire lifespan of your investment, including that final sale price. Cash-on-cash return is it zooms in on a single year, and it really only considers the cash flow you're generating relative to your initial cash outlay.
Interesting. So a high cash-on-cash return might look great on paper, but it doesn't necessarily tell me the whole story if the property isn't appreciating in value, or if I plan to hold on to it for a really long time.
That's a very sharp observation, and it really highlights the importance of using multiple metrics and thinking about your long-term goals. Now let's tackle the gross rent multiplier, or GRM. This one helps you compare the value of a property based on its rental income.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do I actually use the GRM in practice?
All right, so you divide the property's market value by its gross annual rental income. This gives you a ratio, which you can then compare to other similar properties in the area. A higher GRM, that could indicate that the property is maybe a little overpriced. relative to its rental income, while a lower GRM might suggest a potentially good deal.
So it's like a quick snapshot of a property's rental income potential compared to its market value. That's super helpful.
It is, but remember, the GRM has its limitations too. It doesn't factor in operating expenses, which, as you know, can vary widely from property to property. A luxury apartment building with a pool and a gym, that's going to have significantly higher operating expenses
Right.
than a simple single-family home.
Right. A higher GRM might be perfectly acceptable if the property's operating expenses are relatively low, but it could be a red flag if those expenses are eating up like a big chunk of the rental income. This is all starting to click for me now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You're starting to see the bigger picture, and that's really what's so crucial when it comes to ROI. It's not about blindly following formulas. It's about understanding the nuances and applying them intelligently to your unique situation.
I'm already feeling a lot more confident about evaluating potential investments. But before we move on, I'm curious about another metric mentioned in the guide, the debt coverage ratio, or DCR. What's the significance of this one?
The DCR, that's particularly important for investors who use financing. It basically measures a property's ability to generate enough income to cover its debt payments, which is a key indicator of risk for lenders.
So it's like a stress test for the property's finances. If the DCR is too low, it means the property might struggle to meet its debt obligations, making it a riskier investment.
Precisely. Lenders, they typically prefer to see a DCR of at least 1.2 or higher, which means the property's income can comfortably cover its debt payments.
With some room to spare. That makes perfect sense. It's like having a buffer in your budget to handle unexpected expenses. Now let's talk about the cap rate, which seems to be like the holy grail of real estate metrics. What's the deal with this one?
The cap rate, or capitalization rate, is a measure of a property's potential rate of return. It's calculated by dividing the property's net operating income, or NOI, by its market value. A higher cap rate generally indicates a more profitable property, assuming all else is equal, of course.
Hold on a second. Can we break down what net operating income actually means? I think that might be a stumbling block for some listeners.
You're right. NOI represents the income a property generates after deducting operating expenses.
Yeah.
Things like property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and so on. It's essentially the profit a property generates before taking into account debt payments or income taxes.
Gotcha. So the cap rate is telling me what percentage return I could potentially earn on my investment based on the property's current income and market value, excluding any financing considerations.
Exactly. And it's a great way to compare the potential returns of different properties. However, it's important to remember that cap rates can vary widely depending on factors like location, property type, and market conditions.
Right. Just like with every other metric we've talked about, context is key. There's no magic number that guarantees success. Speaking of complex calculations, our guide also mentions something kind of discounted cash flow, or DCF. What's the scoop on this one?
DCF is a more sophisticated valuation technique. It takes into account the time value of money.
Yeah.
And the expected future cash flows of a property. It's often used by professional investors to evaluate large-scale real estate projects.
Okay, so this is probably not something I'll be using to analyze, like a small rental property. Can you give me like a simplified explanation of how it works?
Sure. Essentially, DCF involves projecting the future income and expenses of a property over a specific period, usually 5 to 10 years. These future cash flows are then discounted back to their present value using a discount rate that reflects the investor's required rate of return.
So it's like peering into a crystal ball and trying to predict the financial future of a property, taking into account the time value of money. Sounds pretty complex.
It can be, and it relies heavily on assumptions about the future, which makes it more prone to error. However, it can be an extremely valuable tool for larger and more complex projects, where forecasting future cash flows is essential.
Makes sense. Now, there's one more metric mentioned in the guide, the internal rate of return, or IRR. How does this one differ from the other metrics we've discussed?
The IRR is a widely used metric in finance. It calculates the effective rate of return an investment is expected to yield. In real estate, it takes into account the timing and magnitude of all cash flows associated with the property, including the initial investment, ongoing expenses, and the eventual sale proceeds.
So it's like calculating the annualized return I would earn on my investment over its entire lifespan, taking into account all the cash inflows and outflows along the way.
Exactly. The IRR is expressed as a percentage. and it can be used to compare the potential returns of different real estate investments. A higher IRR generally indicates a more attractive investment.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground here. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about some of the hidden factors that can really sabotage a real estate investment. The guide mentions a few that I think our listeners will find particularly insightful.
Absolutely. Even if you're like a master of all these ROI calculations, there are external forces and common mistakes that can significantly impact your returns. It's important to be aware of these potential pitfalls so you can navigate them effectively.
All right, let's uncover these hidden dangers. What are some of the things that keep even seasoned real estate investors up at night?
Well, we already touched on how important market conditions are. Real estate is cyclical, right? And prices can fluctuate significantly over time. You know, a property that looks like a total steal today might lose its luster if the market takes a downturn.
So it's not just about crunching the numbers. I need to have a sense of the bigger economic picture and how that might impact my investment.
Exactly. Think of it this way: you wouldn't buy a swimsuit in the middle of winter, right? Timing matters in real estate just as much as it does in fashion. And speaking of timing, let's not forget about the silent but steady force of inflation.
Right. Inflation can really chip away at your purchasing power over time if the cost of everything keeps rising, but my rental income stays flat. That's going to impact my bottom line.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to factor inflation into your ROI projections. You need to be confident that your returns will outpace the rate of inflation over the long term.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, the guide also talks about the dangers of making poor investment choices. What are some of the common traps that even experienced investors can fall into?
One classic mistake is overpaying for a property. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of a bidding war, or to fall in love with a property's charm and end up paying more than it's actually worth. That can really set you back from the start.
It's like going to an auction and getting totally swept up in the moment, and suddenly you're bidding way more than you intended.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember that your initial purchase price, that's just one piece of the ROI puzzle. You also need to factor in all the associated costs, closing costs, property taxes, insurance, potential renovations, ongoing maintenance.
So even if I snag what seems like an amazing deal, those extra costs can really eat into my profits if I'm not careful.
Absolutely. It's like buying a fancy new car. But forgetting about the cost of insurance, gas, and repairs, those ongoing expenses can really add up.
The guide also mentions the importance of due diligence. Can you elaborate on that a bit? What does thorough due diligence actually look like in real estate?
Due diligence is all about uncovering potential problems with the property before you commit to buying it. This might involve hiring a professional inspector to assess the condition of the property, reviewing the title history, to make sure there are no liens or encumbrances, and researching the neighborhood to assess its stability and potential for appreciation.
So it's like doing a background check on the property and its surroundings. I want to make sure I'm not getting into a situation that's going to cost me more money down the line.
Exactly. It's better to uncover those issues up front, even if it means walking away from a deal, than to be surprised by costly problems after you've already invested your money.
That's a great point. Now let's talk about taxes. How do taxes factor into the ROI equation?
Taxes are an inevitable part of real estate investing, and they can have a significant impact on your returns. You'll need to factor in property taxes, which can vary widely depending on location, as well as capital gains taxes. If you sell the property for a profit.
So I need to be mindful of the tax implications throughout the entire investment life cycle, not just at the point of sale. Are there any strategies for minimizing my tax burden?
Absolutely. There are a number of tax benefits associated with real estate investing, such as deductions for mortgage interest, property taxes, and depreciation. It's wise to consult with a qualified tax advisor. Make sure you're taking advantage of all the available deductions and minimizing your tax liability.
That's a great tip. It sounds like having a good tax advisor on your team is just as important as having a reliable real estate agent. Now, let's shift gears a bit and tackle a question that's probably on the minds of a lot of our listeners, the age-old debate of cash versus financing. Our guide doesn't offer a definitive answer, and for good reason. It really depends on individual circumstances. But can we break down some of the key considerations?
Absolutely. Let's start with the allure of cash. Buying a property outright. That certainly has its advantages. First and foremost, you avoid the burden of debt and interest payments, which can significantly boost your cash flow and overall ROI.
So it's like the ultimate form of financial freedom. No lender breathing down your neck. But I'm guessing there's a downside to this cash is king approach.
The biggest drawback is the upfront cost. Buying a property with cash, that requires a substantial amount of capital, which might not be feasible for everyone, especially those just starting out. It also ties up a significant portion of your funds in a single asset.
Yeah.
Which can limit your ability to diversify your investments.
That makes sense. It's like putting all your eggs in one basket, which can be risky if the market takes an unexpected turn. So,
Yeah.
When does financing make more sense?
Financing can be a powerful tool, especially if you're looking to leverage your capital and acquire multiple properties. By using borrowed money, you can control a larger asset than you could with cash alone, potentially amplifying your returns.
So it's like using a lever to lift a heavy object. I can achieve more with less initial force. We already talked about the risks of leverage. If things go south, those losses are magnified too.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember that financing, it comes with the added expense of interest payments, which can eat into your profits if you're not careful. You also need to factor in the cost of mortgage insurance and the potential for interest rates to rise, which can increase your monthly payments and impact your cash flow.
It sounds like a delicate balancing act, weighing the potential rewards of leverage against the risks and costs associated with debt. How can I make an informed decision about whether to use cash or financing?
The best approach is to carefully consider your individual financial situation, your risk tolerance and investment goals. If you have a large amount of capital and are risk averse, paying in cash might provide peace of mind and steady cash flow. But if you're eager to expand your portfolio and are comfortable with a bit more risk, financing can be a powerful tool for growth.
So there's no one-size-fits-all answer. It really depends on my personal circumstances and investment strategy. That's really helpful. All right, we've covered a ton of ground already, from dissecting those ROI calculations to weighing the pros and cons of cash versus financing. But before we wrap up our deep dive into real estate ROI, I'm going to circle back to something our guide keeps emphasizing, those hidden factors that can really make or break an investment.
Yeah, you're right. Those are often the things that really trip people up. It's easy to get laser focused on the numbers.
Yeah.
But the real world throws plenty of curveballs. For instance, we touched on market conditions earlier, but let's zoom in on how interest rates play into all of this.
Okay, yeah. Interest rates are like a hot topic these days. Everyone's talking about them. But how do they actually impact real estate ROI?
Well, think of it this way. When interest rates rise, borrowing money becomes more expensive, and that can really eat into your profits, especially if you're relying heavily on financing. It also impacts affordability for buyers, which can cool down the market.
Even if I find a property with great potential, I need to factor in the prevailing interest rate environment and how that might affect both my financing costs and the overall market demand.
Exactly. And on the flip side, when interest rates are low, it can be a fantastic time to buy. Financing becomes more affordable, potentially boosting your ROI. Of course, you need to be mindful of the potential for rates to rise in the future.
It's like trying to time the waves when you're surfing. You want to catch the right economic tide to maximize your ride. Now, another thing the guide mentions is the impact of local regulations. That seems pretty important, but it's not something you always think about up front.
You're absolutely right. Local regulations can be a silent but powerful force in real estate. Things like zoning laws, building codes, even rent control policies can significantly impact a property's profitability.
Can you give me a concrete example of how this might play out in the real world?
Sure. Imagine you're considering a rental property in a city with strict rent control measures. You might be limited in how much rent you can charge, which could directly affect your cash flow and ROI calculations.
So it's not just about crunching the numbers on a spreadsheet. I need to do my homework on the local market and understand the rules of the game before making any decisions.
Precisely. You need to think like a detective and uncover any potential red flags hidden in the fine print. Yeah. Now, shifting gears a bit, let's talk about a hidden danger that's completely within your control. making poor investment choices.
Oh, well, sure, we've all made a few of those. What are some of the common traps that even seasoned investors can fall into?
Well, we already touched on the danger of overpaying for a property, but it's worth repeating. It's easy to get swept up in the excitement of a bidding war, or to overlook potential problems because you're emotionally attached to a property.
It's like going to the store when you're hungry. You end up buying way more than you intended. How can I how can I avoid falling into that trap?
The key is to stay objective and stick to your predetermined criteria. Have a clear budget in mind, and be willing to walk away from a deal if it doesn't meet your requirements. Remember, there's always another property around the corner.
That's a great reminder. Now, another thing the guide highlights is the importance of factoring in all expenses. It's easy to just focus on the potential income, but those hidden costs can really sneak up on you.
Absolutely. It's crucial to consider not just the mortgage payments,
Yeah.
but also property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, even potential vacancy costs. Those expenses can significantly impact your bottom line.
Yeah.
If you haven't accounted for them.
It's like planning a vacation. You budget for the flights and the hotel, but then you totally forget about meals, transportation, and those little souvenirs that always catch your eye.
Exactly. And those seemingly small expenses, they can quickly add up and eat into your profits. That's why it's so important to create a realistic budget that includes all potential costs, and to have a contingency plan for unexpected expenses.
That's a great point. Now let's talk about vacancies. No one likes to think about their rental property sitting empty. But it's a reality that every investor needs to be prepared for.
You're right. Vacancies are an inevitable part of the rental property game. Even with the best screening processes and property management, there will be times when your property sits vacant between tenants.
So how can I minimize the impact of vacancies on my ROI?
First, focus on attracting reliable long-term tenants.
Yeah.
Proper screening and a well-maintained property. That can go a long way in reducing tenant turnover. Second, factor potential vacancy rates into your ROI calculations. Don't assume that your property will be rented 100% of the time.
So it's all about being realistic and building in some buffer to account for those inevitable gaps in rental income. This has been incredibly insightful. It feels like we've peeled back the layers of real estate ROI and uncovered all the hidden complexities.
I'm glad you found it valuable. And remember, this is just the beginning of your journey as a real estate investor. There's always more to learn and new challenges to navigate.
Well said. I feel much more equipped to approach real estate investing with a clear understanding of the factors that drive ROI.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, knowledge is your most powerful asset in the real estate world.
Absolutely. Before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking question. Given everything we've discussed today, what are the most important factors you would consider when evaluating a potential real estate investment?
That's a great question. For me, it always comes back to location, location, location. The old adage still holds true. I'd also carefully assess the property's condition, its potential for appreciation, and of course, run the numbers to ensure it aligns with my financial goals and risk tolerance. Beyond the hard data, I'd also consider the intangible factors. The overall feel of the neighborhood, the potential for growth, and whether I can envision myself owning and managing this property for the long haul.
That's a great point. Real estate investing is it's a blend of art and science. It's about crunching the numbers, sure, but it's also about trusting your gut and finding properties that resonate with you on a deeper level.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, there you have it, folks. We've taken a deep dive into the fascinating and often complex world of real estate ROI. We've demystified the calculations, explored the hidden factors that can impact your returns, and hopefully equipped you with the knowledge and confidence to make smarter investment decisions. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to all the resources we mentioned today.
And remember, real estate investing is a journey, not a destination. Embrace the learning process. Stay curious, and never stop seeking knowledge.
Wise words. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into a topic that's sure to expand your horizons and ignite your passion for learning. Until then, keep exploring, keep investing, and keep those ROI calculations rolling.